Before we can create connections to an external model, we need to enter the access information that enables us to connect to the repository in which the model is stored. We will call that a network connection, as opposed to the connections between specific model elements that Syndeia will create later. The objective of this video is to show how to set up a network connection, either to a configuration-managed repository or to a folder in your local file system or a shared file system. Before we try to create a network connection, we must first open a Rhapsody model containing the Syndeia profile, or add the profile to your model with the Add Profile to Model menu command. Second, we must decide whether we wish to store our repository connection information in the external Cassandra database or locally in a file on our computer. For Syndeia 3.1, in a collaborative environment, we would normally use the external database so that multiple users could share the same set of Syndeia-managed connections between model elements. To set this, we will launch the Syndeia dashboard, go to the Settings tab, and look under Syndeia Store Settings. For Select Primary Store, set to Database. For Select Store Database, set to Cassandra. This is the only option for Syndeia 3.1. Set the values of hostname, port, username, and password for the Cassandra database. If you didn't install the Cassandra database yourself, go to your system administrator for this information. If you have changed any of these, click Apply and close the Syndeia dashboard to save the new settings. Prior to Syndeia 3.1, network connection information was stored locally on the user's computer. Now, this mode is still available by setting Select Primary Store to SysML Model. In this mode, the database settings are irrelevant. Well, third, we must decide whether to save the individual passwords to the network repositories, such as GitHub, Windchill, and so forth, locally in an encrypted file using the Save Repository Password setting. Otherwise, we have to re-enter them each time we access the repository. Note that other users may see the set of network connections stored on the external database, but they cannot use them to access or transfer information without entering password and username for themselves. In our case, we will use the external database. Go to the Repository Manager tab, and on the left side, we see a list of repositories for which we have licensed Syndeia interfaces. Under Local File Systems, we can set up connections to access CAD, Excel, or Simulink files on a local or shared drive, where those files are not in a configuration-managed repository. In each category, we may have one or more existing network connections already stored in the Cassandra database that have been loaded for our use when the Syndeia dashboard was launched. While the network connections are the same for each user of the Cassandra database, each user must also have a username and password to access the repository contents at the end of the connection. If I click on a network connection for which this information is not available, Syndeia prompts me to enter it. If I chose to save passwords locally in an encrypted file, I only need to enter this once for each network connection. Otherwise, I must enter it each time I use the connection. Connections under local file systems include those for all users, not just myself, but I cannot access other users' local drives. Network connections to shared file systems can be accessed by multiple users as long as the path name is the same for all users. To create a new network connection, find the type of repository you want on the left side and click on the category heading. For example, right-click on Doors and choose Add. A new window titled Doors opens. First, enter a repository name. This is a short descriptive name you choose to identify this network connection, in this case D2. Then enter the URL, username, and password that were provided to you by the repository administrator when your access was established. Click OK. You can now see the new network connection under Doors in the left column. Select D2, and you should be able to see the contents of the Doors NG repository that you have been given access to. However, if the Cassandra database administrator has given you only read access to the repository connections table, you will not be able to make changes to the connections. Creating a connection to the local file system is similar. Right-click on Local File System, go to Add, choose a connection name, and browse to a package containing the files you wish to have access to. It is also possible to delete a network connection by right-clicking and choosing Remove. However, the Cassandra database administrator may not choose to give regular users the authority to add or remove network connections because of the problems this can cause other users. If you choose to store network connection info on your local system, not in Cassandra, this limitation will not exist, but it will require other users to exactly copy your network connection name and URL. Otherwise, the Repository Manager tab and commands are very similar. Now, once the network connections are set up, we can select Repositories at the top of the left side and see some of the information stored for each connection, partially blurred to protect our systems. If we click on a specific network connection, such as the MySQL link, we see the model contents accessible through that connection.